took care of the poor? I know this sounds really weird to say who took care of, but when things sort of fall out on you, there's a depression, a recession, there's no jobs, you're a farmer and your crops have died that year from some disease, or there's a drought, or there's a famine, or whatever. Who looks out for the poorest of the poor in the society? If you go back in the Middle Ages and really the early modern era, the system that was in place for doing this, I'll let you just think for a second. What was the system in place? The church. The church was the thing in place for this. And of course, we can go back to the Reformation and talk about how when the Reformation happened, that kind of messed that up a little bit. But still, in places where the Protestant Reformation happened, in places where Catholicism was dominant, the Catholic Church was that system in place to take care of the poor. In places where the Protestant Reformation happened, the Protestant church, whatever that was, usually was a national church of some sort, came in and took the place of the Catholic Church, but did the same basic thing. So in England, the Church of England is responsible for charity and the poor. The Church of England collects charity and it redistributes it almost in a way of taxing and spending as we think about in the modern state. But obviously the Church of England couldn't tax. It was more of tithes and donations and things like that. Okay, so that's what the Church of England does. Now I want you to imagine this for a second. So you've got the church, and so you've got your parishes out there, and you've got your rural church here. And then in the city, you have over this sort of area of the city, you've got the church that's responsible for this city block, and maybe a few blocks over, it's another church or chapel and things like that. But the Church of England sort of has this all, I don't want to say mapped out, but essentially everything is covered by the Church of England. Then in the 1700s, again, if we go back to last week, the Industrial Revolution starts kicking in, and it changes abso-freaking-lutely everything, including where people live. Not just in terms of there's now more people, but where the people live. So if I have this great structure set up for the 1600s, which has churches here, church here, and it's all set up ready to go, and then within about 20 or 30 years, I've completely changed this map in terms of where people are. So they're not here in this rural area anymore. Now there's a lot more here in this area with one church. That's going to create some problems. The Industrial Revolution, there's these drastic and rapid social changes. Whenever you have something like that, there's going to be huge cascading effects from this. The church can't keep up. The places that needed voice for the poor lacked church and priests. So the places where the church was, let's ignore the rural areas for a second. Let's just talk about London here. So the places in London where the church was were the places that have been established for a long time. They've been there for a while. That's where the churches were, blah, blah, blah. The people coming in from the rural areas into London, they don't go to the established areas. They're already established. There's already people there. They have to go to the brand new areas, and those are the ones that start to get filled up. And the church is over here. There's no new church over here because the church hasn't adapted quickly enough. So the places that really do need the voice of the church the most, the help, the charity of the church, they lack a church, they lack a priest, or at least this church here is overloaded in what it has to do. This priest is overloaded in what they have to do. The formal hierarchical structure of the church just can't adjust quickly enough. And so you have, as the 1700s rolls along, as you have all these massive changes, people coming in from rural areas, huge population growth in certain areas of the city, you have a church whose job is to keep up with those things, unable to keep up with those things. And as time goes on, it becomes less and less able to do that. Not because the church has lost any of its sort of, mission or anything like that, though that may be the case. It's just infrastructurally, it's just not able to keep up anymore. And by the time it does make some adjustments, it's a little too late. Decades have gone by with people falling through the welfare cracks. And so now London is, there's always been poor in London, but now there's more poor. There's more poor who are dying. There's more poor who are sick and spreading that sickness other places. More people who are desperate, turning to crime, turning to drink, turning to all sorts of things like that. And so in the midst of this, if you're looking on at the city, you're saying this situation can't keep going. Whatever system we had in place, it doesn't work anymore. We need a new system, and that new system is going to be the state. Because who else? What else can step in to that role? Now here's the deal. It's going to take a long time for the state to get going at this as well. It can't just sort of start up the next day. It's not the state like we think about today, which can go out and buy, and just sort of command corporations to build a bunch of new ventilators. It's a new thing that's new to the job that was the job of the church. So it took a while to get into place to help. And as I mentioned with the poorhouses and the workhouses, when the state got involved, the state usually gets involved to enforce the law. So how can the state get involved? It has to get involved in terms of law. So if you're poor and you need stuff, then there is a law which says you must go to the workhouse. Okay, well, from the position of the poor, they often perceive this as punishment and not charity. And that's going to be true well into the 1800s and 1900s even. We still there are stories about poorhouses and workhouses all the way up until World War II. Again, not just in England, but really all around. And while I'm talking about Britain right here, understand that the Industrial Revolution is going to spread to France, it's going to spread to Germany, Italy, America, and then in the 20th century, it's going to spread to, India, China, all over the world. And where those huge changes, drastic and rapid social changes happen, we're going to see huge changes in every single area. It's just that Britain sort of was the first one to go through this. So we have this old system which is failing. We have this new system which by the 1800s is going to be ready to go, but it is not ready to go yet. So in the sort of 1700s, who fills the gap? And the answer really is John Wesley and the Methodists are the ones that step in to that gap. So what you're going to do is you're going to read a little bit from Wesley next, and then you're going to read a longer article. It's an academic article about what the Wesley message was and how that was transformed into the poverty role that it played, sort of, again, in between the failing old system and the not yet there new system. The Methodism sort of steps in to that role. It's not just sort of a theological idea, but it's a theological idea that gets transformed into a very social practice. And that's what we're going to do. And then we'll come back. Ugh.